Hello, my lovely. I have something a bit different for you for today's episode. Today, I am going to let you in on a conversation that I recently had with a friend and colleague, Lucy Rowett, who is a sex coach and sexologist, a certified sexologist, I might add, because we don't talk about attachment and sex enough. That's what this conversation is all about. Basically, we've had a conversation and she's putting it on her podcast. I'm putting it here on my podcast too. Her podcast is called, what is it called? Her podcast is called The Naked Unashamed Life, which is available on Spotify. So if you want to go and check out more of Lucy's work, please feel free to do so. But this conversation was all about women, sexual pleasure, people pleasing, and how that relates to attachment and intimacy in your relationships. I had to get the big dogs on this one and somebody who knows their stuff about sexual intimacy and pleasure and can kind of talk about it from that perspective. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation. This one is not for having the kids around in the background because obviously we are talking about very adult themes. So just to give you a bit of a heads up on that. But yes, I hope you enjoy listening to this one. I will leave all of the show notes, so where you can find information about Lucy and of course myself, Lizandra. I don't know why I'm introducing myself. I mean, you should kind of know who I am if you're listening to my podcast. But if this is the first introduction to me, welcome. Lovely to have you here. So buckle up for this episode. Listen to this conversation, see what you pick up from it. Maybe it will kind of give you some insight into how you are showing up intimately in your relationships. And maybe it will give you some talking points for you to discuss. Enjoy. Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma, the podcast for millennial women who are ready to heal from the past. Here, we have the deeper discussions on emotional well-being and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. I'm Lizandra, your host and psychotherapist. I'm a little bit obsessed with human development, deep conversations, and finding the lesson even in the most challenging of circumstances. I'm very happy to have you with me on this journey of self-discovery where we unpack the past and heal in the present.
We are recording. Hi, everyone.
I'm so happy to be doing this with you today, Lucy, because we've been talking about it for a while.
We have.
And yeah, so we finally, we did it. We're here.
We did it. We've been chatting for on and off for a few months in various different formats, and now we're making it official.
Yes.
Like a relationship status.
Yeah, first time, right?
We are doing it. And I was saying just before we started recording, I'm joined by my cat here, and she's sitting right beside me. And I thought we were thinking about how we structure this podcast, and you can see me slightly moving because sometimes when she joins me on calls, sometimes she's as good as gold and she just sits there, and other times she decides to start getting a bit spicy with me.
Okay, no worries.
So you can't see her, but she's sitting right there.
Yeah.
Right. So let's dive in. What we're going to cover today?
Right. So our theme of today is around three pretty big subjects, right? So attachment styles, trauma, and also people pleasing.
Mm. And if you're listening to either of our podcasts, because we're going to say double dipping.
Yeah.
We're double dipping. We're getting
more bang for your buck.
We're getting more bang for our buck.
Right.
And I know that if you're listening to either of our podcasts, that these are probably themes that feel very strong for you. Very relevant, very like, oh, okay, you got me in the feels there. Because you're a therapist, Lizandra, and you work specifically with attachment trauma. And I'm a sex coach, and I work with various things, but one of my specialties is working with women and people with vulvas with low libido, and also from faith backgrounds or conservative backgrounds. And the underlying theme under a lot of these is trauma, is people pleasing, is attachment stuff. There's so much underneath in my field. I'm guessing in yours, it's pretty much what people think is the problem is not actually what the root of the problem is. Does that sound about right? Yeah.
And as a therapist, I think you come from it from a very different perspective as well, which is why I was really excited to talk to you about it. The subject of sex doesn't come up that much in therapy, as much as it should do. And so, that's also why I kind of wanted to have this conversation with you today and see how that ties in with attachment and how we can, just kind of explore that a bit more.
Yeah. It was funny because also this happens a lot. I get a thought in my head and then it goes away, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
There was a really good tangent I wanted to go down and it's gone.
That's fine. It will come back. Annoying. We'll catch it on the next round.
This is what I remember now. It's something like, because I know that you were talking about one of the things that you try to communicate with your clients when, am I guessing it's when they come to you with relationship stuff or love stuff and they think, hang on, no, I'm not going to put words into your mouth. Tell me what your clients typically would present with.
So typically I tend to see mostly people who fall into more of the anxious attachment style. So feeling very frustrated about relationships, feeling as though they're very anxious about being in relationships. Like relationships don't feel like a place of safety. It feels a lot like a place of uncertainty. They don't know where they stand with relationships. There is a lot of fear around rejection and abandonment. There's a lot of people pleasing coming out. And it kind of depends on what point they are in terms of their self-awareness. Because initially it might just come out as, I don't know, I'm just having all of these relationship struggles and I feel alone even though I'm in a relationship, not knowing anything about attachment styles. Or they're on the other end of the spectrum where they've read the book on attachment, they've done their attachment quiz, they're very self-aware, they know it's an attachment issue, but they don't really know what the next step is.
Yeah. And it's also because I talk a little bit about attachment styles in my work and it's not something I've gone really deep into. And sometimes I have brought it up with clients. And again, for some, that's my cat jumping down. For some people, it's they're really aware of it. And for some people, they've never heard of it before. And like, I know there's some, I think with any theory within like therapy, psychology, sexology, there's always pros and cons to it. There's always people saying, well, it's not complete, it excludes a lot of things. But I like talking about attachment theory for me personally as a way of helping clients to understand, so where do you fall on it? Like, how do you respond in relationships? What's your default when you feel under stress or under threat or you don't feel seen and heard?
Yeah. I think at the moment, the way that it's kind of been portrayed is that it's like a category of these, you have these 4 attachment styles and then you fall into one of these categories, right? And I think it's been portrayed that way because it's easier to digest the information, but it comes from a place of science. So it's not as simple as that. And as a relational therapist, relationally, we don't just fit into a category, right? We have all these different types of relationship patterns. We're complex. We're, there's so much more to us than just when this happens, then we do this, right? And sometimes people can be very like rigid in their thinking in terms of attachment.
Yeah.
And so really it's more of a spectrum and understanding about relational patterns and understanding what our relational needs are, as opposed to you have this attachment style, so that means this very rigid set of criteria.
Yeah, that was my understanding of it as well. It's I've seen a lot of criticism of attachment theory and I've seen a lot of support of it. And I know it's the same when it comes to human sexuality. We don't fit into neat little boxes. And when I'm talking about human sexuality, I don't just mean whether you're straight, whether you're queer, whether you're somewhere else. It can also be the things that turn us on, the things that get us excited, the things that we fantasize about. I think often it can be helpful to have categories. I think it's helpful to have I couldn't
Is it like
really
the
map.
language?
It can be the language. I think one of my mentors, she said it's like it gives us a map. It
Mm-hmm.
gives us like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Just
Mm.
knowing that as humans, we're not maps. You know, we can fit into a certain category, but there's always going to be caveats and exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
yeah, and with my clients, I'm thinking like the people that the women and people with vulvas that show up in my work. And one of the first things I'm remembering is what they think of as the issue is I've got no libido. I just don't want to have sex with my husband or my partner anymore. It's causing a real issue in our relationship. I feel very stuck in my head. I can't have an orgasm. It just, something is wrong with me. And it it does make me sad because sometimes it can happen where their partners can be like, yeah, there is something wrong with you. We need to get you fixed so that you
Mm.
want to have sex with me again. And I'm always trying to say, well, yes, what is presenting is low libido, not being able to feel pleasure, feeling very inhibited. Maybe there can be some sexual pain, especially if you come from a faith background, although not always. But there's a lot going on underneath that.
Yeah.
And I remember something that I think you and I both kind of agreed on is that when it comes to love and when it comes to relationships and when it comes to intimacy, especially for women and those socialized as women, we are not really taught or encouraged to, you could say, find that attachment, secure attachment with ourselves, to
Mm.
find that connection with ourselves. And I say it's the same with sexuality, where women are generally were only taught about sex within the context of a relationship. Like, I talk about how I have colleagues where if they'll teach a class on how to give a great blowjob, and that class will sell very quickly.
Yeah.
But if it's a class to do with women exploring their own pleasure, it
Mm.
might not sell. It might be a harder sell.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's it is.
Mm.
It's interesting, and it's. I'm guessing if you're listening to this, maybe it's not surprising
Mm.
because what I remember what you were saying with the clients that you work with, where they feel quite lost in their relationship.
Yeah.
Am I hearing that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like not having their own identity within the relationship.
Yeah,
Um, Also, just not having an idea of what they even like sexually,
yeah,
what they like in a partner, even.
mm,
So it translates to different things. It's not just about the lack of safety and not knowing themselves.
yeah.
It translates into a lot of different areas that most people don't really get to unpack or understand.
Hmm. And one thing it reminds me of is my mum always tells me the story that when she married my dad, his mum, so her mother-in-law, took her to one side and said it's really important that you have your own hobbies and you have your own interests, as a way of telling her that even when you're married, and my parents married in like 1980, my parents on both sides, family on both sides, very old school, Church of England, middle class, white, that kind of background.
Yeah.
And it was that knowing that it's really common for women when they enter into relationships and marriages, and I don't think it's changed much now, to lose your identity, to lose that sense of self.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's not even thinking about sex. That's
Mm.
just thinking about who you are as a person in the rest of your life, let alone when it comes to sex and intimacy.
Yeah.
And it's something I wonder with, I know that you said in your sessions, maybe intimacy doesn't come up as much. Is it something that you know that your clients experience as well, that the pattern that plays out in their love life also plays out in their sex life too?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see it as much in the individual work. As in, I think people don't realize that it's actually okay to talk about sex in in therapy and with your therapist.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that it's a space that you can have that kind of conversation. I did see a lot more of this work obviously coming up in relationship therapy because I was also, I don't do as much couples work now, but for a good period of time I was doing a lot of couples work. And so things around intimacy would come up quite a lot actually. Um, and just how you were kind of describing that it's seen or it's positioned as, you know, there's something wrong with the woman, so to speak. and it's, you know, it's her issue. And then actually when you start uncovering what's happening in the relationship, you see that it's a lot about a lack of safety, a lack of connection, and all of these other things that have actually contributed to why it's gotten to the point of what it is now.
And something I'm wondering, like with some of the women that would seek therapy around relationship and attachment stuff now, I would bet many things they end up losing themselves in the bedroom as well. And losing themselves not in the like sexy fun way where I kind of lose myself and let go, but like something that I'm trying to bang the drum on about a lot is whenever we're talking about sex and intimacy, we have to understand not necessarily our childhood, but the messages that we received growing up and the messages that are still in society today, particularly around what it means to be a woman and what it means to be in a relationship, what it means to be a sexual woman, a sensual woman. And I know for many women, when they get into relationships, especially heterosexual relationships, I'm saying this deliberately because there's a script that we fall into. There's a pattern that we fall into without realizing we're falling into it, which is where, okay, the man initiates, and then there's that whole thing about him being a man and being manly, and he needs to be the pursuer, and he has to initiate, and then, okay, I go down on him, and if I'm lucky, he goes down on me, but that might not always happen because it's 2025, and a lot of men are saying I don't go down on women, which is ridiculous. Anyway, and if you're lucky, he might pay attention to your clit, and if you're not lucky, he will just crack on
or not know where it is.
I'm just adjusting myself here. You might not...
So we're going to get into it. We're getting into it. Okay.
That's true. I want to see listening. How many people listening to this? How many of you have been with a man who doesn't know what the clit is? Or, I don't know, has debated the existence of the clit? I've actually seriously heard this. Or either maybe hasn't even cared about the clit in the first place. Or has been like, yeah, just a little...
I wish they could see what you just did right there.
I just did my thumb. I just went just a little kind of, just a little, fine. Okay, done. Foreplay done. Now we can get on to me, which is obviously the main show. And in sexology, it's a term called socio-sexual scripts, which sounds really fancy, but it basically means that when we sleep with someone, we follow a script, we follow a certain pattern. And you're nodding as well. I'm nodding.
That's so interesting. Really
yeah. And I'm saying it specifically it's very much for heterosexual couples, because when you're queer, because there isn't technically a rule book, people tend to be able to explore a bit more,
right?
Especially for lesbian couples or for queer women. But for women in having sex with men, it tends to follow the same script or a very similar script. And then you can think there's something wrong with you, that you're not very imaginative, or that sex has become boring. And part of it is realizing, well, it's a script that we all follow, and a lot of it's down to gender roles, it's down to socialization, it's down to so many things. And there's so much to unpack here, but I always encourage women especially to really question and to explore what messages you received about not just sex, but what it means to be a woman or to have a vulva, about your genitals, about what it means to have desire, about your breasts, about what it means to be an erotic person, and really understand a bit more of that, because I bet you didn't have many positive messages or many affirming messages.
Yeah, and that's very similar to a lot of the work that I do as well, because it's understanding, what have you learned about relationships? What have you learned about relationships from your mum, from your dad, from their relationship with each other? And sometimes the unconscious things that we pick up that inform our values or our beliefs about relationships, and we're not paying attention maybe to what our own beliefs and values are. We're more in tune with, well, what have we unconsciously picked up, or what do we believe should happen because of what we've experienced from our understanding of relationships.
Yeah. It's making me think of this quote from somewhere, and it's where we're doing relationships on default and we're doing sex on default because nobody, I'm not saying nobody taught us, but nobody taught us that. I think it was a webinar I attended years ago, and this person was saying you have to understand that good relationships, and I'm also saying by good sex, they're skills we have to learn.
Yeah.
And we expect them to be by default. We expect them to just happen by themselves.
And they do not.
And they do not. They don't.
Yeah.
And if you were very, very lucky and happened to have parents that had a really healthy, happy marriage or relationship, they probably would have told you that they worked at it. And it took work and it took changing skills.
Yep. And obviously, if that hasn't been your experience, and if you've grown up in very unhealthy relationship patterns, then, guess what? You're going to, normalize.
Yeah. I think especially it's always interesting for me to hear, I'm guessing it's the same for you, to hear the Freudian slips that come out of clients' mouths.
Yeah,
the things absolutely. That come out without them even thinking, without stating it as a fact. All men want is sex. That's all they want. And I'm like, bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Bit more expansive than that. What are
let's unpack that, shall we? It's one of those kind of comments that kind of get dropped as a bomb, and you're like, okay, we're getting to something here.
Yeah. And I often, my style of coaching is never going to be a completely neutral face, because that's not who I am. And when a client will say that to me, I'll sometimes let them see the look on my face as a kind of, are you serious? More because it's for me to stay congruent, but also it's a way to challenge some of that. I'm just thinking, have there been any gold mines, or have there been any things that you've heard from clients, or things that you've gone okay,
all the time,
right, okay,
so all the time.
Are there any general themes that have come up, or things that you've heard lots of people say that have been right, yeah.
I think what I hear a lot from women is almost being afraid of saying what they want.
Yeah.
And needing almost to have permission.
Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
I am wondering, because I know that permission's a big one, and not just within sex and love, but within everything. I'm wondering how much, and as I'm saying this, I'm thinking out loud, because a lot of my work, it's about giving permission slips, and it's not my job to say I give you permission to. It's more helping clients to give themselves permission.
Yeah.
But if we think about the way that women are socialized in general to be givers, to be caretakers, to be taking care of everybody else, and also remember that none of us come from an overtly sex positive and sex affirming society where female pleasure was overtly encouraged and affirmed. None of us did.
Absolutely, yeah.
It doesn't matter what your culture of origin is. There is no dominant over culture that is, and it's usually the opposite. Most of us would have come from a culture or an environment that was basically, don't be a slut, don't give it away, you want to be wife material. Do you want to be a slut, or do you want to be wife material? You can't be both. Good girls don't do this. Good girls don't dress like this. Good women don't do this. Good mothers don't do this. And then also remember that we're not, as women, we're not generally taught to, or encouraged or affirmed to explore our own bodies. I think female sexual pleasure is becoming more mainstream, which is great, but it's been at least 10 years, which is not long. Thanks to Gwyneth Paltrow. maybe making it more mainstream.
Yeah, with her special candle.
I'm not, again, I think like a lot of things, it's not like I'm a massive Gwynny fan, but, I will give credit where credit's due when it comes to mainstreaming a lot of these things.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, tangent.
Do you... Tangent! The candles. How much do you see permission showing up? Like permission to want what you want and to have wants in the first place?
So much in both work, in both couples and in a lot in individual work as well. In individual work, I see it in the form of people pleasing and always prioritizing how other people feel above their own, and to the extent of actually not even understanding what it is that they like or what it is that they want.
Yep. And as you're saying that, it's exactly the same sexually. I am guessing that for the women that you work with, where they don't know what they want, they don't know what they like, they're so used to defaulting to trying to take care of the other person in their whole lives, that is going to translate sexually too.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it can translate in lots of different ways. It can be like, I can't have an orgasm. It can be, I don't know how to let go. It can be, I'm stuck in my head. And then it can also even go down the route of juicy sex, which I hear a lot, which really breaks my heart, where someone will say it in passing, or maybe it's something that's happened in a previous relationship where they had sex because they felt they had to, because that's what kept their man happy. And if they withheld sex and the man became quite pissed off about it. Have you seen that as well?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of issues around, because generally there's a lot of issues around boundaries where attachment is concerned, and like having, finding it hard to be able to set boundaries, knowing what healthy boundaries look like. Obviously that will translate sexually as well, and not knowing that in certain circumstances it's okay to say no, or it's okay to change your mind, and just not having that self-protection awareness, or even understanding that it's self-protection sometimes, that feeling of safety.
Yeah. Like something it's reminding me of is a client, and I interviewed her on my podcast, so I have her full permission to disclose. And she had a very traumatic history of bad things that happened in her childhood. And by the way, as I say this, you don't have to have had bad things to have happened in your childhood. There could be many different things that have happened. But it translated as when she was in bed with her husband, feeling a bit like, I'm trying to use the word, I can't remember the word she used, but feeling a bit like she was just being very passive, where she wanted him to have a great time, but her body wasn't in it. And then when we explored some of her history as well as medical stuff that had happened as well, it was that feeling of, well, of course you're going to not enjoy sex. Of course it's going to feel like something you're doing just for your husband, because there's so much there where you haven't learned how to feel safe in your body. Your body isn't a safe space. If we think that when we're having sex with someone, we're generally naked. When we're naked, that's very vulnerable. We're working with our genitals, that's very vulnerable. And it was a lot of the work that we did was not just learning to feel safe in her body, but learning to listen to when her body was telling her it likes something. And with most of my clients, that's always the foundation. It's not about having multiple orgasms and being like Jessica Rabbit. It's about what actually, not just what do I like, but how does my body tell me it likes something? And knowing that when we're having sex with our partner, it's really normal for things to suddenly not feel good anymore, and that's okay.
Do you also work with people on how to communicate that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I have this is a plug, I have a audio course on sexual communication.
Nice.
And I have a free PDF on sexual communication. And the way that I talk about it is there's kind of I was going to say a pre-game and a during game. There's the pre-work often needs to be you actually exploring what you like in the first place, which might sound really simple, but many women and even men were not taught that. Do you even know what turns you on?
Yeah.
Do you know how you like to be touched and where you like to be touched? Can we create a body map where, okay, I really love it when they nibble on my neck. That just works for me every time. Or I do not like my nipples being played with. And I think it's also interesting the amount of women I've worked with where they've had previous partners that have been really rough with their breasts. Because a lot of the time, men do not realize that breasts are quite sensitive. You cannot touch boobs like you would touch a penis. The same with the vulva. Breasts need a bit more careful handling. And especially for a lot of men, they can, when men see breasts, the kind of the teenage boy comes out where it's like, oh,
boobies.
Boobies.
Yeah.
And like that can be really adorable when you kind of see that in your partner, that when he sees your boobs, he's like, oh, boobs. But again, when a woman hasn't learned boundaries or even built that body awareness, a lot of them are kind of tolerating their partners squeezing their nipples or just I'm using my hands here, or just grabbing them too hard and just kind of tolerating that as a kind of, well, this is just what he does.
Yeah.
Maybe without realizing, that you can communicate that.
Yeah. It's okay to say that you don't like that.
It's okay to say you don't like that.
Yeah.
And then why don't we, because I do like meditations around connecting with your breasts, why don't we explore how your breasts do want to be touched? And what's it like for I'm using my hands, I'm always touching my own boobs here, but what would it be like to have that dialogue with your breasts and ask how they want to be touched? And what's it like to touch your breasts or any part of your body, knowing that it's yours and the boundary literally physically begins and ends with your body?
Yeah.
And that can be a real game changer for a lot of people. Yeah.
Just that way that you kind of described it, of the beginning and end, that's how I also describe boundaries as well. So I'm just seeing all the threads of where it's all connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
What happens in one domain happens in the other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm also thinking, especially in sex, where for women, we're generally the ones who are penetrated. And that literally means you're letting somebody inside your body, which can be very metaphorical, very physical. And what I'm hearing is, especially when boundaries are something very porous to you, you don't have a concept of them in the first place because you were not encouraged to have them, then this very physical, literal and physical, somebody entering into your body boundaries, that can be a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And so obviously if outside of the bedroom you find it very difficult to be assertive and for you to recognize what it is that you like or what makes you feel uncomfortable, of course it's going to translate into other areas. So it's much bigger than, when we talk about people pleasing, that it's not just about, oh, you don't know how to say no or you want to be liked. Like, it's deep rooted in a lot of different areas and it will come out in a lot of unexpected ways if it's not addressed.
Exactly. There's something an exercise that I do, which is very similar, which is how your body tells you yes and no, is maybe in a session I'll get them to imagine that they're walking into a building or somewhere that they don't like, or they're walking into a party or somewhere, and how their body told them it didn't like it. So there's certain places in Vienna that I go to that just completely dysregulate me. And then we imagine going somewhere that you really like. How does your body tell you that? What feels different?
Yeah.
And to start paying attention to those tells as to how your body communicates with you. And it might not be your body, it might be your mind, but how your everything, let's say how your body tell you, how you know when you don't like something. And that can sound, again, very simple and also profound. Like, for example, saying yes to doing something when inside you're going,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
But then we override it, say, just don't be silly.
Exactly. Just
Don't be
ignore it.
silly.
We're overthinking it. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's the
I'm
part
just
of
being a
like you're
silly woman.
dampening your intuition. You're dampening what
Yeah.
those physical bodily cues are, and it's trying to
Yeah.
tell you things. And I think what you're kind of describing is like the somatic practice of understanding like the responses in your body.
Yeah.
To know
Yeah.
when you feel uncomfortable. And I think a lot of the time as women, we switch that intuition off. We switch off that
Yeah.
connection with our bodies. And I found that a lot in the couples work that I would do with intimacy, and a lot of the reason why there was such this disconnection with themselves and their bodies and in their relationship is because they were not listening to those bodily cues, being very disconnected and up in their heads, overthinking,
Yeah.
but not necessarily being in tune with what's happening internally.
And how do you, like with your clients, how do you start to teach them, or what do you do with your clients to start that process of learning to listen to themselves again?
Just getting them to slow things down and notice more. And so if they're talking about a situation, and obviously it's in therapy, sometimes it can be very content heavy because you're talking about, I was in this situation and this happened. And then I'll have to kind of pause and say, okay, let's slow this process down a little bit and let's look deeper at what happened. And even reflecting on like in the moment, like what's happening right now. So as you talk about that, do you notice anything happening in your body?
Yeah.
And for some
Like
people it lands, for some people it doesn't, because they're very, in their head and they prefer to talk it out. But I think when people are intellectualizers and they do overthink, starting to have more of that connection with their body actually helps to regulate their nervous system so much better than just trying to outthink it all the time.
And also, I'm a recovering overthinker. So
And I'm the same. I will analyze myself and analyze, if there's a situation, I've already thought about it 10 different ways because that's just how my brain works.
And it's funny because like the amount of women and people I've met where it's the same, where it's like I'm a former type, I'm a recovering type A brilliant thinker, and I know there's many different things that cause that, I'm neurodivergent, I'm highly sensitive, things from my parents. And I think I know, especially if you're also a woman where you had to work really hard in your career, where you are in maybe a very male dominated profession, where you have had to really prove your worth. Like I was at it was a Women's Day thing for International Women's Day in Vienna for women in career and business. And so a lot of women there are very successful, or they are they're working in science, they're working in banking, they're working in corporate. They have had to claw their way. They have had to claw their way to where they are.
Yeah.
And they've had to constantly prove themselves. And then they wonder why they're still stuck in overthinking in their relationships, in the rest of their lives. It's, well, I'm not going to say that it's always a defense mechanism, but when you've had to work so hard to prove yourself, it makes sense you've had to really overthink. And learning to listen, I think, as I'm saying this, I'm also somebody who, anxiety is a very close friend of mine. Me and anxiety have a very long history together.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that anxiety shows up for me is it feels like I call it like a swarm of locusts. My thoughts don't stop. I can't think. I'm just thinking so many things. And I've done enough somatic work to know, okay, I need to get into my body, but that took years. That took years of work. So it's working with the body. There's so many tangents we can go down from this. Yeah. There's another thing about, being an overthinking person, how to get out of overthinking. There's something also, I'm sure there must be a correlation or something backed up that somebody who is very much stuck in overthinking trauma history, possibly neurodivergent. We know that generally overthinking can happen when we feel under threat or we feel stressed, and this is how our body tries to cope with it. What you've also suggested some of the strategies. What other strategies or tips do you have when a woman's listening to this and she notices, okay, I'm definitely stuck in this dynamic in my relationship where I am giving and giving and giving. I've completely lost my sense of self, and there's now issues in our relationship.
Yeah.
What are the first steps for that?
We kind of touched a little bit on this earlier in this conversation, but I always think about the self-attachment and the relationship that you have with yourself. And that part is always it's so important to focus on the relationship that you have with yourself, because that sets the foundation for all of your other relationships. And so even when I was doing my attachment program with women, one of the very first things that we started focusing on was how you kind of show up for yourself, what that looks like, creating self-care plans, creating plans where they are focusing more on what their own needs are, identifying what those needs are, learning how to recognize what those needs are, and maybe just starting to fulfill that in very small ways to begin with, before we go into the deeper work of, okay, what do I need from a relationship to feel safe? What do I need from, what are the kind of characteristics I seek in a partner in order for me to feel safe?
Because, plot twist, you deserve to feel safe in a relationship.
Safety
Who
is key.
knew?
Who knew that was,
Who knew?
something
Plot
that we
twist.
should all have. Yeah.
Say, like, you are worthy of feeling safe in a relationship. And if you've never realized that needs to be a thing in the first place, that can be a really big growth edge.
Yeah.
It's because when you were talking about that self-care plan, it was something a colleague and a friend said to me a few years ago about how can I make it Project Lucy, or how can I make it Project Lizandra? How can I make it Project da 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 da? So and it doesn't mean you have to just bugger off to Bali for like a month. We have lives to lead.
Yeah.
But it can be, what are all the ways I can delight myself or bring myself joy? I know in my work that often even the word pleasure can feel really loaded.
Yeah.
And it can bring up a lot of connotations when I talk about pleasure. All right, so I've got to be masturbating twice a day and being all this breath work. So what about joy? What would bring you joy? And why don't you do more of that? Even as simple, I worked with a somatic therapist years ago, and he said you can practice this thing where when you're getting dressed in the morning or you're choosing your clothes, notice how your body feels. So when you look at your t-shirt or you look at your top or your trousers, do you get that feeling of like, or like when you put a color against your skin, does it give you that wow feeling? And it doesn't mean you have to do it every single day, or if you've got a uniform for work, but it's a really simple way of like, okay, I'm going to get dressed. What speaks to me?
That's so interesting, because that was literally me today. I'm wearing like a bright red cardigan today, right?
I was admiring your cardigan. Yeah. I was. It's such a cool cardigan.
Yeah, and it was literally that mindset is what I was thinking of, like, what's the color? What's going to make me like feel good?
And I really like this dress, and the neckline I'm not sure about, but you can't see, but I really like my silhouette in this dress. It frames my ass just in a way that I really like.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can sound cliche, like changing your wardrobe, but sometimes it can make a big difference. Where you maybe get a color analysis or something where you actually discover what colors look good against me and what colors that I wear, like, wow, they make me feel like me. It can be like buying fresh flowers. And Aldi, you can do 50% off. You can get them for like a couple of quid. You don't have to. There's a Tantra teacher I like called Davy Ward, and she talked about different kinds of pleasure. Like when we're thinking about the senses, so what would bring me in terms of what brings me sight pleasure? Meaning when I look
Like
at things.
Yeah, what looks beautiful? What do you like the look
What
of?
looks beautiful?
Yeah.
Flowers, plants, getting your nails done or doing your nails, tastes, smells. What do I love to smell? We don't have to make it like super complicated.
Yeah.
And you'll probably find that when you start to do them, you actually feel more like yourself. And it feels easier rather than, oh God, this is so complicated.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be in these big, massive things. That's the beauty of it. It can be the smaller things, the micro things, the micro moments that you're choosing. You're choosing something for you rather than constantly thinking, well, what does everybody else need? What helps me to feel validated by them? It's starting to validate yourself more. It's starting to think about you as well.
And in my experience, both professionally and personally, sometimes it can surprise you where you might be out in the shops and you see just like this fabulous pair of earrings that you can hear maybe your mum's voice in your head or someone's voice in your head going, God, don't they look ridiculous.
Yeah.
But a voice in you goes, but I
like them. Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah.
And you put them on and you suddenly see a different version of yourself. And you walk out of the shop with the earrings in or the pair of shoes, and you're kind of walking down the street going, who am I? Me.
Yeah.
I feel like me. And that can be sometimes more healing than years of psychoanalysis. Potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that work can also be through some inner child work as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes reconnecting maybe to the things you denied yourself or you pretended like you didn't really like or that you weren't really into because it didn't fit in
I
with
do that as well.
Yeah, with what was, what was trendy at the time or what was, everyone else was doing at the time, and reconnecting more to just like previous versions of you, things that you used to enjoy, because that's the part of ourselves that as women we can lose as we get older, as we get into relationships, especially if you're in a relationship and you're so focused on others' needs and externalizing rather than internalizing.
Being the good wife, the good girlfriend,
all
the
these
good
roles.
mum,
Yeah.
the good daughter, the good responsible worker,
The good girl.
the good girl, the acceptable. I had a podcast, I was interviewed by someone a few weeks ago called Leanne, and she was saying how she left a marriage because many different reasons, but one of them was that she completely lost herself. She was the good, she was also very religious. She was the good wife. She was the epitome of self-sacrifice until her mental health broke down. And this is public, it's available. You can all listen to it. And that was when she first realized, I actually need to discover who I am. And I think in a lot of these cases, unfortunately, it sometimes takes something like a health breakdown, physical, mental, menopause even. I know menopause is a big catalyst to realize that I have been the martyr. I have been the good person my whole life, and I have no idea who I am. And no wonder I feel empty. No wonder when I'm having sex with my husband, it just feels like another thing I'm giving away rather than what do I actually want in the first place.
Yeah.
And also I don't do a lot of inner child work, but I talk about like connecting, what did you like as a child, and can you do more of it?
Yeah.
Like drawing, painting.
That's literally part of my program. Yeah.
Take yourself for ice cream.
Yeah.
Bake cupcakes for yourself. I share this. I still have my cuddle blanket. I'm 35 years old and I still have my stinky cuddle blanket.
Do you?
I do. It's in the other room.
That's pretty impressive, to be honest.
My husband knows there's 3 of us in our marriage because, well, 4 now because we got the cat. But it gets washed once every 5 years, if I remember, because it has to have the smell. But the reason I have it was from therapy. It was from having a therapy session about 10 years ago where I realised I missed my blankie.
Okay.
And so this is one way in which I take care of my inner child as a sex coach. I have a stinky yellow blankie that is now beige. I'm just adjusting myself.
All sorts of ways to reconnect to your inner child, or just previous versions of you, reconnecting to what you like, what you love, and essentially what makes you you.
And something that I'm remembering as well is that also when we're children, well, depending on the age, depending on what happened, but generally children, when they're happy, when something feels good, when something feels delightful, they don't hide it. And it's something that was taught to us as we got older. And a lot of people don't always make that connection that when you want to start feeling more pleasure, you need to start paying it. I'm not necessarily embracing your inner child, but there is a lot to that. Remembering that when you were a child, there was some point in your childhood where when you wanted to giggle, you giggled. When something felt good, it felt good. When you walked into a sweet shop, your eyes went, oh! Can you start to connect to that part of yourself more? Because we can't selectively numb. So when we have to learn to shut parts of us down, often for very functional reasons, this is not about completely opening yourself up the whole time and that everything's bad. But when we have to learn to repress some things, we repress a lot of things.
Yeah.
And
we can't pick and choose. We can't pick and choose what things we want to keep hold of and what things we want to repress.
No, it all gets squashed down.
Yeah.
And if you are trying to make yourself be this orgasmic woman who is sensual and voluptuous and all of these things, which is what a lot of clients come to me for, I'm always saying I hate to be a party pooper, but we need to focus on this foundation of feeling more safe within yourself, learning to listen to what your body is telling you, and starting to let yourself feel joy in all of the non-sexual things first. I love this concept by a tantra teacher called Barbara Carellis, where different kinds of gasms. So we tend to think of an orgasm as like an orgasm, but we can also have an orgasmic experience like a foodgasm, where you're eating something so delicious that you go, yummy. Yeah. Or I had a hot bath-gasm last night because the bath temperature was just so
perfect.
When you get into the bath and it's just like, oh. And it might sound facetious, but it's that when you start to really pay attention to and savor everything that feels good, what you're doing is starting to train and teach your body that I already know how to feel pleasure, that pleasure is safe, that I'm allowed to feel pleasure, so that when we start exploring sexual pleasure, it's not this massive jump from one to the other.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing with your clients where when they're very much stuck in this kind of good girl role, and then we have this message, everyone gets this message that we must be good girls, good women, being the good person. But then when we go to bed with our partners, we should just be able to flip this magical switch. And suddenly,
be the sex kitten. Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Very, very rarely happens. So what brings you joy and what lights you up and what makes you feel good in non-sexual ways? Because it's like, it's building, I'm going to say building up that muscle memory. But again, if you think about it, if you don't think of yourself as a sexual person, if you're not used to touching your own body, if you're not used to even looking at your vulva in the first place, if you've also maybe had surgery and horrible medical experiences, plus childbirth, plus all these things, and then you're expected to go to bed with someone where they're touching your vulva And it's like making yourself go from 0 to 100
Mm.
without any of the steps in between.
Yeah.
Well, of course you feel like that.
And it's not going to feel like a place of safety. You're not going to be able to get out of your head and into your body.
No. And it actually, what your head is doing is keeping you safe, because what's happening is your body's detecting a threat.
Yeah.
Even if you know that you're not actually under threat. And there's also something that it's reminding me of, I think especially in say British culture, although that's like an asterisk, but like I live in Austria, where it's not really a very sex positive culture, but in mainland Europe we have a very different attitude towards nudity. Like we have sauna here, where when you go to sauna, we have saunas in most public swimming pools. The sauna area is separate, but in sauna you're nude. And sauna, you can have like separated genders or mixed genders. In Austria and Germany, it's not as common now, but it's called FKK, which is like nudism.
Okay.
There's one of the public swimming pools just up the road. There's a nude sunbathing area. It's separated, so you can't see it. You go through a door. But it's also a given that when you go to like a public changing room in a swimming pool, women are just kind of stripping off. There's not a thing about nudity. Nudity isn't sexualized as much as it is in the UK, in the US, in many other cultures.
Yeah.
And so, again, women are expected to make this jump where our naked bodies are seen as something potentially dangerous, potentially we have to cover it up, to then stripping everything off and being a sex kitten in bed. And there's no in between.
Yeah. Head fuck.
Literally. It's a like, I still remember the first time I did sauna was in Finland, 2014. It was on a sex positive retreat, but also in Finland, sauna is a massive part of their culture, more than Austria. And I was in a sauna with, I don't know, 10, 15 people, men and women. Everyone was nude, and it wasn't a thing. It was a thing, but it wasn't a thing. And it was beautifully freeing just to see naked bodies, but it wasn't sexual. It was just, it's Finnish culture. And it's really beautiful if you can ever experience that. Just remembering it was very, very freeing for me. This was how I got onto this topic. We're talking about attachment and trauma, talking about nude saunas. But if you can experience that, it can be very, very freeing, depending on what already feels comfortable to you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. One final thing I kind of wanted to come back to, because you were just talking about like the attachment, or rather when you were a child, how pleasure and just being excited by things, being honest about what your natural responses are almost, they're very authentic. We're not filtered yet. And I think especially like with well, any insecure attachment style, really, we're actually going back to secure attachment. We're more secure as children, as babies. We start with secure attachment. And I think people don't realize that you're coming back to something you've already experienced. You've already experienced that feeling of being worthy, of being enough, of just asking for what you need in terms of when you're a baby. If you're tired, you cry. If you're wet and you need changing, you fuss, you make noise, you cry. You don't think, is it convenient now for my mum to wake up in the middle of the night, or my dad to wake up in the middle of the night and change my nappy? It's no, my nappy's dirty. Get up, come and change me. That's what I need right now.
Yeah. And it's the same with animals as well. Like with animals, like with my cat, she will never be shy about demanding things from me.
Yeah.
And also, I love what you said there, because this is what I say, which is it's already there. This ability, accessing pleasure, it's already there. You don't have to add anything in. You don't have to change into somebody else. It's more the coming back to what's original, I don't know, your internal blueprint.
Yeah.
What's already there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm using my hands to, like, I'm putting my hands over my heart here as a kind of, it's already inside, rather than I'm over here and this perfect healed version of myself is way over there.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've got to do all this work and all this healing because there's something fundamentally wrong with me, rather than I'm already whole and it's already here.
Yeah. And it's a reconnecting to that part of yourself.
Yeah. I think of it as being able to exhale a little bit deeper. And every time I've done or processed things like this, it's like, yeah, I can exhale a bit deeper. Or it's like another layer of the onion comes off. Or another layer of armor I didn't know I was holding is coming off, and I feel freer in myself, rather than I'm having to change myself into a completely different person.
Lucy, I could talk to you all day.
Yay! Me too. This is so fun. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up now because we've been chatting for ages.
We have. But this has been such an interesting and enlightening conversation. So I hope, listening, you got lots of gems and lots of, different ways of thinking about things, maybe that you haven't thought of it before.
And I would really love to hear your takeaways, either through Lizandra's podcast or my podcast. Should we say how people can connect with us?
Yeah. So I will post a link in my show notes, and I'll post a link to your Instagram as well in the show notes.
We'll send each other our links so we can cross-post them with each other's stuff. Let's do that. And yes, with me, whether you're a regular listener or not, I do have a free PDF on how to confidently ask for what you want in bed. I have a short audio course on that as well. I also have a really awesome program coming up end of April called Body Bliss, which is exploring a lot of what we've talked about here, which is reconnecting to yourself and what feels good to you. All the links will be in the show notes. And what was I going to say? Something else that my brain has gone. Any questions, just send me a message. I would love to chat with you. Not check. That's the one.
Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.